Hello and welcome to Layers of Living Water. I am so honored you joined me on this very special day. This is Christmas Eve. I hope you're with family. I hope you're with those that you love and ones that love you, because it's such a special time when we share love, joy, and happiness. You may have tuned in today and, maybe your glass is not filled with joy and happiness and you find yourself not very happy with what's going on. So I want to share a story with you today that will help you and bring some answers to you. The story is called How to Fill Your Empty Glass. I'm sure that if you're feeling empty today, you would love for your glass to be filled with joy. You'd like to have joy and happiness in your life. Matter of fact, have it running over so that you are able to share it with others. So this teacher stands up in front of a class. He sets a glass jar on the table. And as you can imagine, the students were all kind of looking at each other, said, "Hey, wonder what's going on in today's class. This is something different we've never seen before." The teacher just kept on working. He pulled out a bag, and in the bag he had some rocks. They were good-sized rocks, and he took the rocks and he began to fill the jar. After a few moments of carefully placing the rocks in the jar, he shook the jar a little bit and he said, "Okay, it's full." He looked at the students and he said, "Now I have to ask you a question. Is this jar full?" Well, as you can imagine, the students I think this might be a trick question. So they began to talk amongst themselves. The teacher said, "Hey, this is not a trick. You're welcome to come up, feel the jar, look at the jar, shake the jar." And so they did, and then the students looked at each other and they said, "Yes, teacher, the jar is full." Okay, sit back down. Out of his bag, he pulled some pebbles. He took the pebbles and began to pour them on top of the jar. He put a few on there. He'd shake the jar a little bit. He'd pour a few more and he'd shake the jar a little bit more. And the pebbles began to filter down through the rocks, filling the jar even more. After a few moments, the teacher said, "Now, students, I'll ask you once again, is the jar full?" The students looked at each other and said, "Hey, we got it wrong before. Let's make sure." They went up there, they shook the jar. They were making sure everything was there. It was filled to the top with the rocks and the pebbles. And they said, "Yes, teacher, the jar is full." Once again, he asked them, "Sit down for a moment," and out of his bag, he pulled some sand. And he began to pour the sand on top of the rocks and the pebbles. He would shake the jar a little bit, and as he shook the jar, the sand would filter down through the rocks and the pebbles, and the sand began to fill the jar. After a few minutes, the jar was full, now to the top, with the rocks, the pebbles, and the sand. He looked at the students and he asked them, he said, "Okay, now I'm going to ask you one more time, is the jar now full?" The students looked again, they shook the jar and they said, "Okay, you got us twice. There's nothing else that can go in this jar." And the teacher said, "Well, you would be right. The jar is now full." You see, when you looked at it, when the rocks were in there, which the rocks are the foundation, it appeared that it would be full. But after a few minutes, we added the pebbles and got them to go in there. And then eventually we added the sand. So the teacher said, "Let me teach you a life lesson." And I share that with you today. The rocks are your foundation. The rocks have to do with your relationship with your family. The rocks have to do with the relationship with your Heavenly Father. Those are the solid base that you must have in which to build. Then there comes the pebbles. Now the pebbles are things that maybe you like to play sports, or maybe you like to go have games. Maybe you like to watch a little TV every now and then. Those are like the pebbles of life, because guess what? If the pebbles were taken away, it wouldn't matter that much. It's not like you're going to go without, because you still have the solid foundation. You still have the rocks. And so then the teacher said, "Now, then there comes the sand." And the sand are things that you do. Maybe you're running errands. Maybe you go visit some friends. There are things that you do for fun. You don't have to do them. If they go away, it's not going to affect your lifestyle. So the teacher said it is very, very important how you fill the jar. The students were looking at each other, and what a great life lesson they were learning. And they asked the teacher, they said, well, teacher, what does the jar represent? The teacher said, I'm glad you asked that question. The jar represents you. That's your life. And what you put in your life is so important. The foundation of how you stack your life is very important. What if you did it backwards? What if you would have put the sand in there first and then the pebbles? You'd have had no room for the rocks. And then the things that don't really matter so much, if they were taken away, you'd be empty. And my friend, today you might find yourself in that situation. You may be feeling empty. You may be feeling like, I've done everything wrong. I haven't built my foundation correctly. I have filled my life up with things that really are unimportant, and some things I know I shouldn't be doing. But my friend, the good news is that at any point in time, you can start over. You can start with that good foundation, building that quality relationship with your mother and father here on earth, building that quality relationship with your family, and building that quality relationship with your Heavenly Father. And then you can add the other things. And as you do, your life is filled with joy. So today, my friend, I simply ask you the question, do you sit there and find yourself filled with joy? Do you find yourself filled with happiness? Does your life feel complete, or do you maybe feel like, I wish I could go back and do things again? The good news is that you can. At any point in time, you can basically pour everything out of your life and start with an empty jar. And then how will you fill the jar? If you fill the jar correctly, starting with the proper foundation, your life will be so wonderful. You'll be so happy. And hey, things will come. You saw me, I shook the jar, the teacher said. I had to shake the jar, and as I shook the jar, it made room for other things. When you live life, there's circumstances and issues that will come along. They're going to shake your life. They'll shake your jar. But if you've got that solid foundation, you can handle it. It won't cause you to lose everything. It won't cause you to be so sad. It won't cause you to feel like life's not worth living anymore. So my friend, today, on this wonderful Christmas Eve, I ask you the question, is your life filled with joy? Is your life filled with happiness? Is your life filled with those things that are important? If not, make a change. Do something different. Start building that quality foundation with your family, with your Heavenly Father. And once you do, you will find that as the jar fills up, the decisions you will make quality decisions. Why? Because you have a very solid foundation. And if everything in your life goes away except for the foundation, it won't matter. You can still have joy. You can still have peace. And you can still have happiness. My friend, today, find that happiness. Find that jar, which is your life, to be full of the right things, and begin enjoying life from this day going forward.